Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1. Theseus enters the Labyrinth. The sea winds carried the scent of salt and stone as the ships from Athens approached the shores of Crete. White waves broke against the cliffs below the palace of King Minos, whose halls rose above the island like a fortress built by the gods themselves. Among the young Athenians gathered upon the deck stood Theseus, son of Aegus, his gaze fixed upon the distant land. Around him fear hung heavier than the sea mist. The youths and maidens beside him had not come as travelers or guests. They had come as tribute, chosen to be sent into the labyrinth beneath the palace, where none who entered ever returned. For years, Athens had endured this terrible burden. The Minotaur, a monstrous creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, dwelled within a maze so vast and confusing that even its builders feared its twisting corridors. Every passage resembled another, every turn led deeper into confusion. Those sent inside wandered until terror, exhaustion, or the beast itself claimed them. As the ship entered the harbor, many of the young Athenians lowered their eyes in despair. Theseus alone remained steady. He had not come to die in the darkness. He had come to end it. The palace of Knossos gleamed beneath the sea when the captives were brought before King Minos. Marble columns rose toward painted ceilings, and the air smelled of incense and fresh-cut cedar. Yet even amid such beauty, the shadows of the labyrinth lingered. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the sea, Princess Ariadne secretly sought out Theseus. She had seen the courage in his face and could not bear the thought of another life being swallowed by the maze. Placing a spool of crimson thread into his hands, she told him to tie one end at the entrance and unwind it as he traveled. If he survived, the thread would guide him home. When dawn arrived, the great bronze doors of the labyrinth opened. Cool air drifted outward from the darkness below, carrying the scent of damp stone and age. Theseus stepped forward while the others watched in silence. He secured the thread at the entrance and began to descend. The corridors twisted and branched in every direction. Shadows pooled in corners where sunlight could never reach. The farther he traveled, the quieter the world became, until only the sound of his own footsteps remained. Yet he did not turn back. Each step carried him deeper into uncertainty, farther from safety, and closer to the challenge he had chosen. Somewhere ahead waited the Minotaur. Somewhere behind him remained the familiar world he had left behind. Holding fast to Ariadne's thread, Theseus continued onward through the winding maze. For the first time since leaving Athens, the true climb of his journey had begun. Story 2. Rostam faces the first labor. The moon hung above the wilderness like a silver shield as Rostam rode across the lonely frontier. His mighty horse, Raksh, carried him through a landscape of rugged hills and wind-carved stone, where few travelers dared endure alone. The young hero had already earned a reputation for extraordinary strength, yet the journey before him would test far more than muscle and courage. Far away, the Persian king had become trapped in enemy lands, and only Rostam possessed the skill and determination needed to reach him. The road ahead would become known as the Seven Labors, but on that first night, Rostam knew only that danger waited somewhere beyond the darkness. As evening deepened, the wilderness grew silent. The cries of birds faded, and even the wind seemed to retreat into the shadows. Rostam dismounted beside a spring and allowed Raksh to graze while he rested beneath the stars. The cool air carried the scent of sage and dry earth. Though weary from travel, he remained alert. These lands belonged not only to men, but also to creatures spoken of in fearful whispers. Travelers shared tales of monsters, demons, and beasts that provided the empty places between kingdoms. At last sleep overcame him, yet while Rostam rested, another set of eyes watched from the darkness. A lion, enormous and fierce, moved silently through the night. Its golden eyes gleamed in the moonlight as it approached the camp. Powerful muscles rippled beneath its hide. It had hunted these lands for years and feared nothing. Slowly it crept closer, drawn by the scent of horse and man. The beast lowered its head and prepared to strike. Before Rostam could awaken, Raksh sensed the danger. The great horse charged forward with a fury that matched any warrior. Hooves thundered against the ground as horse and lion collided beneath the moonlit sky. The lion roared and lashed out with claws sharp as knives. But Raksh fought with relentless strength. The battle echoed across the wilderness until at last the lion fell defeated upon the earth. The noise awakened Rostam, who sprang to his feet and stared in astonishment at what had occurred. There stood Raksh, breathing heavily but victorious, while the lion lay motionless nearby. The hero understood immediately that this journey would not be won through strength alone. Every challenge would demand vigilance, loyalty, and trust. As dawn spread across the eastern horizon, Rostam prepared to continue. The first labor had revealed itself unexpectedly, striking before he had even reached his destination. Yet rather than discourage him, the encounter strengthened his resolve. Mounting Raksh once more, he rode toward the rising sun. Greater trials waited ahead, but the path had begun to reveal its true nature. The climb was no longer a distant idea. It had become reality. Story 3. Shaka's First Victory. The grasslands of southern Africa stretched beneath the morning sun, their golden blades bending and swaying beneath the wind. Herds moved across the distant hills and birds circled high above the valleys, where scattered homesteads dotted the landscape. The world appeared peaceful, yet beneath that calm surface, rival clans competed for territory, cattle, and survival. In this land, strength alone was not enough. A leader needed courage, discipline, and the ability to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. Among the warriors stood a young man named Shaka. Though he would one day become one of the most influential leaders in Southern African history, he was not yet the figure remembered in stories. He was still proving himself. Many around him doubted his future. Some saw only a young warrior from uncertain circumstances. Others questioned whether he possessed the qualities needed to lead men into battle. Shaka listened to their doubts but carried them silently. He understood that reputation was not given, it was earned. When conflict arose between rival groups, Shaka joined the warriors prepared to meet the challenge. Spears were sharpened, shields of hide were inspected. Elders offered guidance while younger warriors tried to conceal their nervousness. For many, this would be their first true test. Stories of battle sounded glorious around evening fires, but standing upon the field itself was something entirely different. As dawn broke, the warriors advanced across the grasslands. The earth trembled beneath hundreds of feet moving together. Dust rose into the air, and the sound of voices echoed across the valley. Shaka remained focused upon the path ahead. He observed the movement of his opponents, the shape of the land, and the strengths and weaknesses of those around him. Where others rushed forward driven by emotion, he moved with purpose. When the fighting began, confusion swept across the field. Warriors shouted, spears flew. Shields collided with the force that echoed through the valley. Yet amid the chaos, Shaka's determination remained steady. He fought not merely with strength, but with discipline, adapting to the challenge unfolding before him. Every moment demanded courage. Every decision carried consequences. By the time the conflict ended, the young warrior had proven something important, not only to others, but to himself. The first great challenge had risen before him, and he had not retreated. The climb ahead remained long, filled with greater obstacles and greater responsibilities. But the road had become real. Looking across the grasslands as the sun climbed higher into the sky, Shaka understood that leadership begins when a person chooses to meet difficulty rather than avoid it. Story 4. Maui slows the sun. Long ago, when the Hawaiian Islands were young and the stories of gods and heroes still moved upon the winds, the people faced a problem that touched every part of their lives. Every morning, the sun burst across the horizon in brilliant gold, lighting the mountains, valleys, and shores of the islands. Yet before fishermen could bend their nets, before farmers could finish tending their taro patches, and before artisans could complete their work, the sun had already raced toward the western sea. Daylight vanished so quickly that people struggled to accomplish even the simplest tasks. Across the islands, families spoke of the same frustration. The days were too short, and no matter how hard they worked, time always seemed to slip away before the labor was finished. Among those who listened to these concerns was Maui, the clever and determined hero whose deeds were already known throughout Polynesia. Maui paid close attention to the difficulties of ordinary people, while others accepted the swift movements of the sun as something beyond their control. Maui wondered whether the problem could be changed. The more he listened to fishermen, farmers, and elders, the more convinced he became that the islands needed longer days. It was not enough to complain about the challenge. Someone would have to confront it. The idea seemed impossible, for the sun was one of the greatest powers in the heavens. But impossible tasks had never discouraged Maui before. Determined to help his people, Maui prepared for a journey to Haleakala, the great volcanic summit where the sun was set to begin its daily climb across the sky. Together with the members of his family, he gathered strong ropes woven from coconut fiber and strengthened by sacred prayers. Then they made the difficult descent up the mountain. The path wound across fields of lava and steep, rocky slopes where cold winds swept down from the heights. With every step, the villages below grew smaller until the islands themselves seemed suspended between ocean and sky. At last, they reached the summit and waded through the darkness, watching the eastern horizon for the first sign of dawn. When morning finally approached, the edge of the world began to glow. Slowly, the first rays of the sun appeared above the horizon, spilling light across the clouds and mountaintops. At that moment, Maui sprang into action. He cast the sacred ropes and caught the blazing rays before the sun could race across the sky. The struggle that followed shook the heavens. The sun pulled with tremendous force, determined to continue its course, while Maui held fast and refused to let go. He called out on behalf of the people of the islands, explaining how quickly passing daylight made their lives difficult. The contest continued until the sun finally agreed to slow its journey and move more gently across the heavens. From that day forward, the people enjoyed longer hours of sunlight. Fishermen had time to prepare their boats. Farmers could tend their crops without rushing. Families completed the work that sustained their communities. Standing atop Haleakala and watching the newly lengthened day unfold across the islands, Maui understood that great challenges often appear impossible until someone chooses to face them. The climb to the summit had been difficult, and confronting the sun had seemed beyond reason. Yet the first true test of any journey is often the moment when we decide that a problem is worth the effort required to overcome it. Daily Thread for June 3rd, the first hill. Every journey reaches a moment when the road stops being an idea and becomes a challenge. Today, Theseus stepped into the winding darkness of the Labyrinth. Rostam discovered that even the strongest heroes must earn their victories one trial at a time. Shaka met the reality that stands between potential and achievement, and Maui climbed toward the heavens to confront a problem that seemed larger than any one person could overcome. None of them stood at the end of their story. They stood at the beginning of the climb. The path that looked clear from a distance suddenly revealed its steepness, its uncertainty, and its demands. Yet this is where every true adventure begins to take shape. Dreams become effort, intentions become action. The traveler learns that courage is not found after the challenge is conquered, but while standing before it. Tonight, remember that the first hill often feels taller than all the mountains beyond it. Not because it is the greatest obstacle, but because it is the one that asks us to begin. Beyond that first rise, the horizon widens, the traveler grows stronger, and the road slowly transforms from something feared into something known.